Part 1. The thud in the night. The wall clock struck with a dry, hollow rhythm, 12 slow chimes, echoing through the small, secluded house in the outskirts. Outside, the wind whistled through rows of leafless trees, carrying the winter chill into every crack of the doors. Everything was submerged in a thick, heavy stillness, the kind of stillness that made one feel as though time itself had stopped. Claire Dawson, still awake at her old wooden desk, was hunched over her sketchbook. She was a nature lover, often capturing nocturnal birds with meticulous strokes of her pencil. Tonight, her only plan was to finish one more drawing before heading to bed. Out there, the occasional hoot of an owl drifted through the air, as familiar as the heartbeat of the night. But then, bang, a sudden crash exploded like a gunshot in the silence. The window glass shook violently, and the wooden frame groaned in protest. Claire jolted upright, her pencil slipping from her fingers and rolling onto the floor. Her heart pounded hard, each beat slamming against her chest. She turned her head. At the large window overlooking the pitch-dark garden, a massive owl loomed, its wings spread almost across the entire pane. Its talons clung desperately to the wooden frame, as if it could barely hold on. The moonlight slanted down, spilling across its wide, unblinking eyes, cold, fierce, and pleading. But it was not the eyes that froze Claire in place. Between the curved, trembling beak, the owl gripped a crumpled piece of paper, stained dark in several places. In just a second, she realized it was blood, and the blood was still wet. The paper quivered in the wind, as if it might fall, might slip from the creature's hold at any moment. Outside, the wind howled louder, lashing against the walls. Tree branches scraped against the glass with a chilling sound, mingling with the quick, shallow breaths escaping her lips. Slowly, Claire rose from her chair, each step toward the window leaving her unsure whether she was dreaming or awake. The wall clock still ticked steadily, but now, every second seemed to stretch longer, pulling apart the distance between this moment and the last normal second of her life. The owl did not move. It only tilted its head slightly, the kind of tilt Claire had seen in hunting owls when they were sizing up their target. But this time, the gaze was not assessing, it was urging. Claire swallowed hard, her breath fogged the glass. One question slid into her mind, cold and sharp as steel. Why would an owl carry a blood-stained note, and why had it come here? Part 2. The Trace of Fear. Claire stood frozen before the window, feeling as if the blood in her veins had turned to ice. Her instincts told her this was no ordinary occurrence, but another part of her, the part that loved nature, the part that believed animals never appeared without reason, compelled her to step closer. She unlatched the window slightly, and a gust of icy air swept in, making her shiver. The owl still did not leave. Instead of panicking at the sight of her, it only backed away a little, just enough for her to reach out. Its talons clutched the wood tightly, its wings trembling faintly, as though it had endured a long and grueling journey. Claire reached for the paper. The owl's beak was strong and rigid, but when she pulled gently, it released its hold without resistance. The note was heavier than she expected, damp, sticky with blood. Under the dim glow of her desk lamp, she could make out hurried, shaky handwriting. Ink had blurred into the bloodstains, but the words were still legible. "Do not call the police. Follow the light." A chill spread across her skin. The message was short, but it carried an urgency that felt absolute. Someone had written it in desperation, and now, it lay in her hands, delivered by an owl. Claire looked up. The owl was still there, its gaze locked onto hers, as though waiting for her to decide. In that moment, she realized she was standing at a crossroads. She could shut the window and ignore it, or she could step into a story she had never imagined herself part of. Fear began to seep into her every breath. She recalled old tales of wild animals appearing as omens, of inexplicable rescues. But she had never thought she would be the one in such a story. Outside, the wind moaned through the trees, stretching into long, mournful cries. The owl tilted its head once more, then let out a low, resonant hoo, deep, heavy, and laden with a summons. Claire tightened her grip on the note. Her instincts told her this was not a coincidence. This was a call for help, and she was the only one chosen to receive it. Part 3. The Night Guide. The owl suddenly took flight, its wide wings stirring a gust that sent a few dry leaves skittering off the windowsill. Claire stood frozen for a moment, the blood-stained note still in her trembling hand. Then, for reasons she could not explain, she did something her normal instincts would have screamed against. She threw on her coat, stuffed the note into her pocket, and ran after it. Outside, the cold air bit into her skin. The night sky was like a vast black blanket, punctured only by the pale moon and a handful of scattered stars. The owl circled once, then landed atop the street lamp at the end of the road. The old bulb flickered weakly, spilling a faint pool of yellow over the gravel path. Claire quickened her pace, her heels tapping softly but steadily against the ground. Just as she was within a few steps of the pole, the owl took off again, its wing beats sweeping the night like the stroke of a broom. It did not fly far, just enough to stay within her sight, before perching on another lamppost. The winding road led out of the neighborhood, weaving through patches of open ground swallowed by darkness. Each time a streetlight appeared, it became a tiny island of light in a vast ocean of shadow, a place where Claire could catch her breath before stepping once more into the thick, black unknown. Only minutes later, she began to notice strange signs. Under the third street lamp lay a white handkerchief, draped carelessly across the sidewalk. She bent down, and her chest tightened when she saw the dark stains spread across the fabric. Blood. Partly dried, its red turned to a deep brown. Farther along, she found a child's shoe, small enough to fit into her palm. The toe was scuffed and frayed, as if it had been dragged along the gravel. Claire froze, scanning her surroundings. Silence, only the wind rustling through the grass. But as she reached down to pick up the shoe, another sound threaded into her ears, the faint crunch of gravel under a footstep. Someone, or something, was behind her. She spun around. The road lay empty. No figures, no movement, but the cold prickling at the back of her neck slid down her spine, warning of an unseen watcher. She moved faster now, clinging to the owl's trail. Between light and shadow, its shape appeared and vanished like a flying phantom. It called out, "Who?" Its voice low, hollow, and heavy, as if carrying some secret signal. Claire felt her heartbeat no longer belonged to her. It was moving in time with the owl's wings. With every step, fear wrapped tighter around her body. Yet at the same time, an inexplicable urge pushed her forward, like standing on the edge of a cliff and wanting to look down, even knowing the drop would be fatal. Then she saw something that made her stop. An empty soda can lay on the ground beneath a lamppost. She touched it. The metal was still warm. Someone had been here, very recently, and if they had left these traces, they were moving in the same direction she was. Up ahead, the owl lingered longer than usual, perched on a rotting wooden fence, its golden eyes fixed on her. In that moment, Claire knew she no longer had the option to turn back. Part 4. The Abandoned House. The owl led Claire to a stretch of overgrown land, the wild grass reaching her waist and swaying in the night wind. At the far edge, hidden behind a cluster of thick trees, stood an old wooden house. The sagging gray roof caved on one side, the walls blotched with rot, all wrapped in a silence so heavy it felt suffocating. Only one thing broke the stillness: the front door was ajar, and from within, a flickering light spilled out, like a lantern guttering in the wind. Claire froze. Every survival instinct screamed at her to leave, but the owl stayed, perched on a broken post near the steps, its golden eyes unblinking, as if waiting for her to enter. She swallowed hard, zipped her coat up to her chin, and stepped slowly toward the door. The smell hit her before she even crossed the threshold, damp and musty, laced with something else that made her shudder: the metallic tang of blood, rich and suffocating, as though it had seeped into the very fibers of the rotting wood. Inside, the main room lay in darkness, save for a wooden table in the center. On it sat an old phone, its recording function running. The small screen pulsed with a slow, steady light. Beside it, a kitchen knife lay on its side, its steel blade mottled with fresh blood. Drops of bright red pattered to the floor, blooming like dead flowers across the boards. Before Claire could think further, a weak sound reached her ears from behind a torn curtain separating the back room. A low, ragged moan, broken and hoarse, as if the voice had been worn away by too many unanswered cries for help. She stepped forward, her hands trembling as she pulled the fabric aside. A woman lay curled on the floor, her wrists bound with electrical cord, her eyes swollen, lips cracked. Her body was covered in bruises and cuts. Claire knew that face. It was her neighbor, missing for 3 days, the one the entire neighborhood had searched for without success. "Please," the woman whispered, her voice trailing like wind. It is not a bird. It knows him, and it knows me." Her words hung unfinished as the owl suddenly swept through the space between them, its wings striking against a side door with such force that it burst open, revealing a narrow passage leading out the back of the house. Heavy footsteps thudded on the porch outside. Someone was returning. There was no time to think. Claire grabbed the knife from the table, cut through the cords, and hauled the woman to her feet. Together, they slipped through the doorway the owl had opened, the cold night air slapping their faces like freedom itself. They ran across the backyard, weaving through a path between the tall weeds. Behind them, the front door slammed open, followed by a string of harsh curses. The owl swooped low, gliding ahead of them like a living arrow, guiding them through the darkness. Only when the first street lamp of the neighborhood came into view did Claire allow herself to believe they had escaped. Part 5. The Vanishing Wings. The wail of police sirens tore through the night like a blade, slicing into the heavy silence that had wrapped around everything. Red and blue lights flashed across the trees, glinting off puddles in the dark windows of sleeping houses. Claire stood by the roadside, still holding tightly to her neighbor's hand. Their breaths mingled, fast, shallow, and freezing, like two people who had just escaped a deadly snare. The first officers rushed forward, guns at the ready. They moved toward the abandoned house in swift, silent gestures before disappearing into its darkness. An ambulance screeched to a stop, headlights flooding the road. 2 paramedics hurried over, lifting the woman onto a stretcher. The white light washed over her swollen face, and Claire shivered. That was a face she had believed, only minutes ago, she would never see alive again. Claire started to follow, but stopped. A strange emptiness crept into her chest, as if she had lost something precious. She tilted her head, searching for the shape of familiar wings. Nothing. The last she had seen of the owl was just after they had crossed the empty lot. It had dipped low, its wings brushing the skeletal branches, then vanished into the dense, fog-like night. No cry, no trace, only a wide, cold absence that made her feel smaller than she ever had before. A police officer approached, his voice carrying both interrogation and disbelief. "You are saying an owl led you here?" Claire nodded and recounted everything, from the glass shattering at midnight, to the blood-stained note, to the chase through the shadowed streets. When she finished, the officer simply closed his notebook without comment. His eyes said what his words did not. The story was too strange to believe. Her neighbor was loaded into the ambulance. Just before the doors shut, the woman looked at Claire one last time. It was not only gratitude in her gaze, it was a silent warning. Her lips moved, forming words Claire could not hear over the scream of the departing siren. The neighborhood slowly sank back into quiet. The police left, their tail lights fading toward the horizon. Claire stood alone, eyes fixed on the darkness where the owl had gone. The street lamp lit an empty road, as if nothing had ever happened. She glanced up at her own window. The glass still held the faint smudge from the owl's impact, like the signature of the night itself. In her chest, 2 opposing feelings coiled together, gratitude and unease. Gratitude for her rescue, and unease for the question without an answer. How had it known the way, and would it return? Part 6. The Call of the Night. In the days that followed, Claire lived in a strange balance between reality and dream. By day, she worked, talked to neighbors, and tried to blend into the rhythm of normal life. But every night, as the clock edged toward midnight, she would sit by her window, eyes fixed on the dark garden. There was no more pounding on the glass, no flash of golden eyes in the shadows. Yet each time the wind rushed through the trees, she could almost hear faint wing beats far away, so quick she could not tell if they were real or just a memory replaying itself in her mind. The story spread through the neighborhood. Some called it a miracle. Others said Claire had simply been in the right place at the right time. No one truly believed the part about the owl. They nodded, smiled politely, and dismissed it, as though it were an unimportant detour in the map of everyday life. But Claire knew better. She remembered the owl's gaze, not the wild look of a hunter, but an expression with purpose, with understanding. It had not merely found her, it had chosen her. And from that night on, she realized something. Not all rescues come from people. Some come from connections unseen, bonds that cross species, override survival instincts, and stretch past the boundaries of fear to touch something deeper, the instinct to protect. One evening, as she was closing her window, she heard it. From somewhere far away came a hoo, faint but unmistakable. It did not last, just long enough to brush against her memory and stir something in her chest. Claire stood still, her hand on the frame, eyes searching the darkness. The silver moon hung high, lighting the gentle sway of the trees. The sky stretched endlessly above, as though opening into forever. And somewhere, deep in the folds of the night, a wingbeat echoed, growing fainter, leaving her with the certain knowledge that the bond still existed, merely waiting for the right moment to return. Claire smiled softly, not because she believed she would see the owl again, but because she knew, in this world, life is sometimes held together by things we cannot see, cannot explain, but that are undeniably real.